Welcome. We're really delighted to be here to kick off Future Talks again. We've been on a bit of a hiatus, so excited that Erin's gonna bring it back full speed for November. But tonight, we're here to talk about mob programming. It's a topic that engineers here know and love, and we've invested a lot of our energy into understanding it better, and we're really eager to share that with you. Before we get started, I'd love to know a bit more about you, our audience, and what kind of brings you here tonight. How many of you are software engineers or web developers, DevOps? That's a lot of hands. How many are in kind of management or do Scrum or Agile, executives, sales, HR? Okay. All right. So we kind of maybe half and half engineers, half other. Excellent. We have something for everybody. Um, how many of you have ever tried to write code? Yes. And how many have done that as an individual specifically? And in a pair? Okay. And how many of you have ever mob programmed before? Not so many hands. That's why we're here. This is great. It's a good place to start. I'm glad to see that the topic is interesting to people who have not heard of it before. So to further get us started and get us in the mindset of what this tool is for, maybe these situations sound familiar to you. An engineer is working for weeks or maybe months to deliver on a project, and when they come back, what they've built doesn't solve the problem. And it's too late to change course, so this weeks or months of work is just crashed. The solo project never makes it to customers. Has anyone experienced that before? Okay, I see some hands, probably the engineers. Let me call that out. There's also a scenario where individuals or two teams have conflicting priorities. Maybe a front-end engineer is asked to add a web form to a site, but they would discover they need some database changes, and that's a whole different team they have to reach out to. Database team, that's not their top priority, so the work grounds to a halt. They're stopped. These two priorities just can't coexist. So another reason that work can slow down. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Okay, continuing to see hands. Do you know an experienced engineer who's a go-to when everything's going wrong? Does the work pile up when they're on vacation, and do their vacations get interrupted? Is the loss of this employee significant to your business? You know that engineer, more hands, slightly more hands. And have you ever been in a scenario where you've written some code, you put up a pull request or a PR to get it reviewed, and it gets caught in this back and forth of reviews and never gets shipped to customers because you can just never get out of that state of referring to your code, and I'm seeing heads nodding in the front row. Is that familiar to you? Yeah. These are all things that absolutely happen in software engineering. And these are things that our teams that mob program don't experience. We're really resilient to these moments where you're not getting feedback, where priorities are conflicting, where one person is in charge of all the knowledge, and where you can't find a way to disagree productively and move on. And those are some things that make us really aware that this process of mob programming we use is helping us. So what is it? This is what it can look like. This is Cory, his team mobbing, and they're working at a Mediascape here in our office. It's on a different floor with a different color scheme. The important things to note is that you have a big screen and a table around it where about 6 chairs are. We plug one laptop into this screen, which means that one person is writing code at a time. A second person is navigating them. The writer we kind of refer to as the driver, and the navigator is the person who's looking ahead in the path where you're trying to go and helping steer you there if you get off course or if you need advice. In this particular picture, we have 3 engineers who've called into this mob remotely. So we have this mix of remote and in-person mobbing that we can do just with any screen sharing session. So here, we have 5 engineers. Mob programming. A mob session like this is got to be at least 3. If it's 2, it's a pair, but 3 or more and you're in a mob. And we have multiple teams that maintain their work on a daily basis in a mob. And realistically, what this is 2 to 4 hours at a time. You might take some mental breaks to get some relief from that close quarters, or you'll take breaks to talk about your broader strategy and think of the work that's needed and engage where your priorities are at and if you're solving the right problem at the right time. Some of our teams plan to do all of their sprint work, so their weekly tasks and the features they're trying to roll out, they'll do that all in a mob. Other teams will plan for individual work and then switch to a mob when they need to. We're really trying to be conscious that it's a tool that we want to use for particular scenarios. So how is mobbing different than pair programming? I called out 2 roles previously, the driver and the navigator, which makes mobbing sound a lot like pair programming. There you have the two roles and you switch off. So these 2 people are so involved, how do you get the 3rd, the 4th, or the 5th to participate? In a typical mob, that 3rd person will keep the time. So you have anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes where one person can drive, and then the timer is going to call out when it's time to switch so that new people will take on those roles, and you keep everyone engaged in what's going on. This rotation creates a need to see what's happening, and it creates a need to stay engaged with the work going on. There's a fear of missing out in this scenario. So mob FOMO, the real thing. And it can be kind of hard to walk away from this work in progress. It's a little bit exciting, and you kind of want to see everything that's going on. You want to learn everything that you can. So in a 1-hour period, you could kind of be on for 30 minutes. You could drive for 15, you could navigate for 15, and then you could be off and you could be in that timer role, or you could be able to take a break. You can step away if you're interrupted by other teams, if you need to address an issue coming up. There's that flexibility. And that flexibility makes it, in some ways, a little bit easier than interacting in just a pair. Pair programming can be kind of anxiety-inducing, and I'm not saying that the mob isn't. That also has its own sort of anxiety. But with a single other person, you're working through a challenging problem. You're closely interacting with that other individual. That requires a lot of focus and can be hard to maintain past an hour. In a group setting, individuals can take breaks. They're interruptible, and it just kind of helps ease out what would other be a really intense one-on-one interaction. You have a group to kind of take the temperature of and get a feel for how everyone's feeling in that group. So who tends to participate in these groups? Mobbing is a great place to learn and to figure out what you can do and to do it with support around you. It's really ideal to have a mob in which one person is sharing knowledge while others are learning something new. In this setting, I'm onboarding another team onto a new project that they've never seen before in a language that they haven't written in before. And I'm able to do that because I worked with my team on that code, and I can pass it on to another team. For this reason, this sharing of knowledge, a group of people with different abilities and different areas of expertise are great complements in a mob. In effect, a heterogeneous group learns more together, which is critical in an industry where we're solving highly complex problems, and we're never seeing the same problem twice. So in software engineering, you'll hear a lot that it's a great career for people who love learning. This is a really great environment to do it in. But more so on like a particular individual, how many of you would call yourself an introvert and may even be hesitant to speak at times in a group? Okay, I'm not. I mean, I kind of am. In a mob, because of the rotation that we use, you always have your chance to speak. You're asked to speak. It's your job at that point to navigate, to ask questions as the driver, to provide structure for the team. And so an introvert can kind of really blossom in this setting. Likewise, an extrovert is going to get that opportunity to listen and hear what their teammates are coming up with in more of a natural flow instead of a setting where you kind of have to rise to the occasion in order to be heard. So it lessens that anxiety about participating. New engineers, so someone who's new to engineering completely, starting their career, or someone who's just coming onto a team from a different company, it's a great way to pick up the skills, to get familiar with the tools, with the languages, with the structures of the code. It's a great way to ask questions and to watch the more experienced folks have higher level architectural decisions about where your course is and where you're going. I experienced a setting where I could watch two senior engineers ask the best questions that I had never thought of. And I learned from them to keep asking. There were no stupid questions. There's always more that can be learned. And you kind of watch that model and you just pick it up and roll with it. It also can really help to identify your learning opportunities to see what you want to fill or what gaps you want to fill in. I especially like to think of senior engineers and what they can get out of this configuration, though, because they maybe seemingly have the least to gain. But it really comes down to sharing the load. A senior is often the person who's given the hardest tasks to do. And when they work on them independently, they reinforce this idea of the knowledge silo. They are the ones who are the controller of the information. They're tasked to do more. And that can limit the growth of the rest of the team. You're not able to give the kind of mid-level and junior level people the chance to explore and learn. The senior's role in the mob can really be in providing that architectural direction, keeping velocity up. And what they get out in the end is that they're not the knowledge silo. The team has a ton of context for the code that was written, the choices that were made, and the team is ready to maintain that code to respond to incidents surrounding that change going out into the real world where the internet is going to throw everything at you. And they're just really robust. And so it's this amazing mentorship opportunity for someone who is more senior to bring up everyone around them. Another example of how this is really a space of learning. There are risks to taking this on. And one of the most common ones you'll hear from management is, hold on, you're going to take 4 brilliant people and they're all going to work on the same thing when they could each work on 4 separate things. I'm going to lose productivity. We're going to slow down. And we didn't see that happen. Cory is going to speak to this point, but we saw work speed up. We did more in this format, not less. There's also a risk of whether, as a group, you can maintain this close social interaction. It's challenging. And if you can't find a way to disagree productively with the people around you and talk frankly about your code and still buy in to what you're shipping and what you're sending out to customers, then you can have real problems. And that's another reason, or that's something that Caito is going to talk to as far as developing that culture and keeping those interactions working really nicely. Let's talk about the reward. Each individual in this mob has much clearer priorities because the team is going to focus on working one thing at a time. Previously, when we each had our own tasks, I would have to find time to review others' code. We actually had a single engineer who had to review everyone else's code. And it was a huge task to manage when do I do my work and when do I help someone else with theirs? And how do we get all of those priorities out the door? The mob allows us to minimize the amount that we multitask so that we can work on a single task. Because multitasking is not always a great experience. You can lose things that way. We've also found that having a shared familiarity with all the choices we make when writing the code makes us all really buy into what we're shipping and producing for our customers. The ample learning opportunities are great. Being able to take 4 engineers and bring them up to speed on a new technology is fabulous. We've experienced a ton of increases in speed because of this. And lastly, interchangeability. Knowing that tomorrow I can step out and not work with my team and they will progress regardless of whether I'm there or not, that's a huge thing. It's huge to allow people to have that break, that time where they can take care of kids, go on vacation, anything that might pull you away from work or anything that might interrupt your schedule. So we've had really good success with that. For our mobs that succeed, and there's some of us in this picture, Caito's there. This is my extended team family. Once we got over the hurdles, once we got started mob programming, we could see on a weekly basis how we were growing, and we were seeing all this good behavior modeled, and we were experiencing really fast progress. We were learning how to disagree quickly and respectfully, and to hold our work to the highest standards, and we had a ton of fun doing it. Kind of captures that feeling. But in my time as a software engineer and in my previous careers, I've never worked with a group of individuals that came to know and trust each other so quickly and with such good humor while being so productive. It is a remarkably rewarding experience. As I worked with Caito and Cory and numerous other colleagues were here to prepare for this talk, we spent a lot of time thinking how our success mob programming is also a product of the broader culture here at New Relic. We're a team-centric company. There's over 300 engineers here. All of our teams can choose their process, so no one is required to mob program. The teams who do really invest in that culture, though. We're really intrigued at what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we build up a process around it. We love sharing stories of these mobs and what we find from them. We invite other individuals to join our mob so they can experience it and take it back to their teams. We try to support other teams as they get started, help troubleshoot if their mob feels like an angry group all kind of yelling at each other. Shouldn't feel like that. Should feel really rewarding. Yeah, that's our culture. And Caito is going to really dive into more of what that feels like. Our experience here, Caito, Cory, and I are on 3 different teams, all unique. We all mob program and we do it differently. So we've kind of tried to find those common threads for you. We have many of the same reasons for doing it though. Cory and his team supports our insights product, and they choose to mob on all of their work. Caito's team supports our users' subscriptions to our products. They plan work individually, but let their work determine when to mob program. And my team supports our account and usage data. We kind of have a blend of approaches. We plan everything to be done in a mob, and then the mob will decide if we can split off work. And why are we here for Futuretalks? This is an interesting point. Futuretalks is about looking ahead. It's about the newest, biggest thing. And I would love to tell you that this is new, that we've invented it and that we're going to take all the credit. And that's not the case. Mob programming is not new. It's part of extreme programming. It's part of Agile Playbook. It's been around, and there's a lot of resources that you can find on it. What we've heard from our colleagues and in our own experiences, though, getting started mob programming is the really hard part. and mobs fail more often than they keep going. So we're excited to share with you tonight the key aspects of what we feel has made us successful. Cory is going to talk about how his team fits into the broader culture here and how getting buy-in from management is a key part of collaborative group work. He'll call out what makes his team's interactions delivering value to customers more remarkable than he's experienced in his 20-year career. Happy anniversary, man. Caito is going to focus more on the engineering team itself, that culture and how it gets built up. She'll have advice for getting started, being motivated, and keeping focused while mob programming. We're going to take a brief break between Cory and Caito, so plan on that. And then after Caito, we're going to do a Q&A so that you can keep those questions in mind at the end. We'd really love to hear from you. And with that, come on up, Cory.
Can everybody hear me? Oh, yep, I can even hear myself. That is weird. Hi, everybody. My name's Cory. I am a lead engineer here at New Relic, and I work on Insights. If you're not familiar with our product lines, Insights is our dashboarding product that we use that our customers can pull data from all over our product lines into a single place. My team is one of many teams here at New Relic using mob programming, like Maureen mentioned. Like a lot of the other teams here, we opted to try the process because we wanted to ship production quality software, but we wanted to do it at extremely high velocity. That's a really tough combination to achieve. You're basically asking for the best of both worlds, and you can technically not have either. If you've worked in software very long, you understand. A little bit of a spoiler warning, we actually managed to pull this off, and my team, as well as a lot of the other teams here, both those of us that are using mob programming and those that aren't, have managed to hit extraordinarily high shipping velocities with really low defect rates. The holy grail of software engineering. In the case of Insights, we managed to burn down our backlog at a little bit more than about twice the rate of any team I've ever worked with ever. Even the most productive teams I've worked with in my career, nowhere close to the rate at which we are shipping new features. We complete tasks faster than, as a group, than any one of us can achieve as individuals, and that was really unexpected. Especially because not only are we shipping them faster, but we're shipping them with fewer bugs, fewer defects, and less rework. The amount of time we end up spending merging code into our production code bases and shipping it has actually dropped to a fraction of what it used to be because we have a lot less churn. There's just not as much rework to be done. It's really tempting to just chalk all this up to mob programming and say mob programming is the panacea, everybody adopt it, and we fix all of the software engineering's problems. But that is really not the truth. The reality of the situation is that mob programming is a software development process. It is no different than any other process. It's just a process. It's only successful here because the organizational support we have to really fully utilize it. Our engineering organization here is structured to allow our teams to have an incredible degree of freedom. We actually want each team to be able to maximize productivity without being blocked by external issues. There's a lot hidden in that message. And it's a really lovely goal. Like everybody would say that, yeah, ideally that's what we want. But the thing is, it's a lot easier to say that than it is to actually do it in practice. The reason it works here is that our engineering department explicitly chose to give our teams full vertical ownership of the entire product line. And the only way you can hand full ownership of an entire product over to the engineering team is if you have buy-in across the entire organization, and that means you have to have implicit trust. New Relic engineering teams have a rather awesome amount of power. We are given full decision-making authority and ownership over our entire product. That means we get to prioritize our work. We're free to make our own decisions on design and implementation details. We own the entire product stack and the deployed systems. And with that much power comes a disturbing amount of responsibility. And that's what product ownership means here at New Relic. We have the authority to guide our own products, but we also have the responsibility to do it well. As a team, we decided we were going to hold regular mob retrospectives after we decided that we were going to adopt mob programming. We first decided we wanted to try out mob programming. And in fact, when the idea was pitched to me, I was against it. But we took it to management, and our engineering manager said, you are free to go ahead and do that. Absolutely give it a try. And I'm going to hold you accountable for that decision. So you need to think through how you are going to prove to me that this was a smart decision in the first place. Mob retrospectives. If you're not familiar with the term retrospective in the industry, it's a collaborative review of a working process. We conduct them for all kinds of reasons. In particular, we hold mob retrospectives where we specifically focus the entire group on discussing the mob itself. What was working? What isn't working? What do we need to change? What experiments do we want to run? What do we need to just put in the trash? And then we take all of that and we use it to actively improve the process. We have a feedback loop that we can use to communicate with management whether or not we're actually doing a good job and whether we're improving. One of the many responsibilities my team has is that it's up to us to decide when we need to push back. We have to decide when scope needs cut. We have to decide when something needs to be rethought, when we have to change our priorities. Sometimes it's up to us to make the decision that the entire course that we're on is incorrect and we have to change. We're given the freedom to make really big decisions, but we're also responsible for pushing back and making our team's needs known to our managers. The combination of authority to push back and the freedom to apply that authority provides all the accountability we need to make sure that our decisions are being made well. And the interesting thing about this is that this is a bidirectional system. Our executives and our management staff are expecting us to push back against them. If we raised our voices and got ignored, we'd stop trying. I would venture a guess that almost everybody in this room has experienced that. If our managers are sitting there waiting for us to tell them what's wrong so they can fix it and nobody says anything, they can't do anything about the problems. We've probably all experienced that. For this to work, you have to have bidirectional communication. It has to be open. Our engineering, our management, and our executive teams actually focus on prioritizing maintaining open communication lines. It's something we put a lot of work into to make sure that we don't fall into that trap of closing off communication and then letting things atrophy. If our engineering teams determine that there's a critical issue in our product and it has to be addressed, we know that we have both the freedom and responsibility to say something about that or that need. And we know that if we say something, we're going to get heard, and the engineering executives and our management team are actually going to prioritize that work. They may push back against us and say, yeah, we understand, but we can't do that for another X number of weeks. Then we can negotiate for priority, but we know that we're going to get heard. We're not just going to be told, no, that's not important, don't do it, go away, and sit back down at your desk and work. Mob programming as a concept completely encompasses pushback as a part of the core of the process. Within the team, as we're sitting in the mob, we're constantly pushing back against each other as we're implementing things. If anybody, any single individual, any subset of the group thinks that what we're doing is the wrong direction, they say something. And they say something knowing that everybody else is going to stop what we're doing and we're going to listen. And we're going to have the conversation that has to happen and we're going to come to a resolution. Everybody's voice is important. Everybody's voice gets heard. That's a really important concept. We also have to understand that the mob itself might very well push back against the needs of an individual. Someone might have a very strongly held opinion and everybody else disagrees. Just because you think you're right and just because you think you're important, your message is the most important, it doesn't mean you're correct. And you have to acknowledge that the group's consensus outweighs yours. As a group, we also have to decide when we're going to be pushing back against management. If we find that a feature or a process is not providing the anticipated value, we speak up. We know that our managers will listen to what we have to say and will be willing to adapt along with us. This concept even applies to how our team interfaces with the whole organization. Our product roadmap and the needs of our product from the platform we support require that we resist interruption. We have to maintain forward velocity. But we also have to be aware that our product is one of many products in the suite that we offer, with our teams that depend on us to produce features and enhancements for their product lines. We have to take that into account. We have to be able to be flexible to allow competing needs from outside of our team to get work done when it needs to be done. We can't just say, no, we're not going to do that, we're more important. That doesn't work. All that does is make a blocker out of your team. We own all aspects of our products. I mentioned this earlier. You hear this referred to as full stack engineering. For us, it means a lot more than just the technical implementation details, which is usually what it refers to. I mean, it definitely encompasses that. We get to make all of the decisions about how we build everything we build, and we don't get second guessed on it. But we also have to own deployment. We have to own management of the systems once they're in our production environment. And we have to own the process that we use to build that software and guarantee that it works. Mob programming is a process that a bunch of our teams have chosen specifically to assist us in full ownership of the product. My team chose the process specifically because it addressed a need we had that was going to allow us to support the product that we owned at the velocity we needed to achieve. When the team needs to make a decision, we do it in the mob as a group. Leveraging the collective knowledge of the group allows us to make better decisions. It's highly likely that the group is going to have more acquired knowledge and make a better decision than any one individual acting on their own. Our teams prioritize distribution of information by always focusing on having the team member with the least amount of knowledge spend the most time at the keyboard. We call this learning mode. We do it to accelerate the learning process for the less experienced engineers on the team. We also alter the normal process of rotating the drivers, which would typically happen on a clock cycle. If we have one person who needs to be in learning mode, we stop rotating the drivers and we just keep that person at the keyboard. The person with the least amount of knowledge spends the most amount of time typing, and they reinforce those concepts faster. They conquer learning curves at a much faster rate. When I first joined Insights, I didn't know the languages we used to write the software in, and I knew very little about the product. I came from a very different background. I was an embedded systems engineer. And Insights is a JavaScript-powered user interface. So wildly different aspects of product. I looked at it and I thought to myself, well, it's going to take me about 6 months to become operative on this team, given my knowledge of how long it takes me to learn things. And instead, I was put in the driver's seat. I was handed the keyboard. The team sat around me, and in 2 months, I knew everything there was to know about the product that we build and all of the features of the applications and languages we use to build it. For me, that is an astonishingly short amount of time to learn that amount of information. It worked so well that when we added a new team member about a year ago, we decided to hire someone with no professional experience. We recruited someone who'd gone to code school and had not ever worked on a software engineering project professionally. And we turned her into a fully contributing engineer in less than 6 months. We need to be able to quickly change direction, and we need to be able to reprioritize work. And to accomplish that, each team needs to be as free from dependencies on others as possible. This works for us because we're focusing on creating what the industry has started calling T-shaped engineers. We want each team member to have breadth across the entire product, every system, every language, every piece of technology that we use. But T-shaped engineering is also built on the assumption that the people that you brought in have a depth of subject matter expertise of all their own. So everybody's deep in one or two areas and wide across the entire product. Mob programming reinforces this approach by having each team member participate in the development of every feature. Since we all collaborate on the design and implementation of everything we do, we all have a really deep understanding of all of the decisions that were made and how that got implemented and the systems that ultimately shipped from it. This is really important because I like going on vacation. And I am the most senior person on the team. I have the most knowledge of our highest throughput systems. And were it not for this, I would not be allowed to leave. I would be holding the pager all day long, every day, and I would not go on vacation. Instead, last summer, I spent a week in the mountains with no cell phone service. I didn't get paged once. Our teams can own our products and make the decisions like the ones that I've been talking about because we have support from our entire organization. And that's because New Relic structured our engineering department around the concept that teams are the unit of work, not individuals. When this concept was first proposed, it sounded like it was definitely not going to work. I couldn't figure out how you could put power in the hands of the teams and not the individuals and expect them to achieve anything. Well, it works because each team ends up being responsible for owning the entire product and delivering on their roadmap. They are simply told, this is what you need to achieve. And our managers and executives are dedicated to ensuring that we have everything we need to get that job done with the minimum amount of external dependency. Mob programming is a radical idea for most organizations. It was a radical idea for me. But it matches extremely well when you match it up with an organization that focuses on making teams the unit of work, because mob programming is all about the team as the unit. It wouldn't be possible to even implement and utilize mob programming and get the benefits that we have if we didn't have an organization that was willing to put the weight of their decision-making power behind it. Our managers and our executives decided that as a department, every engineering team would be given complete decision-making authority over what they own. Without that power and without that buy-in from the entire organization, the mobs wouldn't be able to function and they wouldn't be able to produce the output that we can. Freedom from external blockers means a constant focus on removing dependencies between teams, since every dependency between two teams is an opportunity for blockage or disruption. Raise your hand if at any point in your career you needed to ship something and couldn't because there was somebody else who hadn't shipped something else first. Yeah, that works in both directions. Our management and executive teams cannot know where to focus their effort if we aren't clearly communicating with them when and where the blockers are coming from. On the flip side, as developers, we have to work with our managers to help clear those dependencies when they're identified. It's not simple enough to say our team has no dependencies on others, so we're good to go. We're going to go heads down and work. Because sooner or later, somebody's going to come along and say, yeah, you know what? We need you to build something for us. And you're not allowed to say no. You have to have a process that allows you to take that in. And you have to be able to flex around it. Mob programming frequently uncovers and highlights dependencies because of the number of eyes and brains you have on the problem at one time. We see issues much earlier in the process, and we can raise the flags necessary to let people know that something is wrong and has to be addressed before it becomes critical. Another audience participation moment. Raise your hand if you've ever shipped code to production only to find the defect afterwards. Yeah, how nice would it be if that didn't happen? With more people combining their brains on the problem, finding those problems earlier and identifying the issues you need to test for before you ship means less rework, less churn, less lost productivity due to workarounds and rework. Fewer cross-team delays, and ultimately it means you're shipping faster and you're shipping with fewer defects. This industry is full of really smart people. We owe it to them to trust that they're making smart decisions. And if you're willing to give them the power to make decisions about their own products, you have to trust that they're making good decisions about how to do their jobs. That means our managers and executives have to implicitly trust that the engineering teams are making good decisions, we're making them judiciously, and we're making them intelligently. Those of us that work on engineering teams have to have the same amount of open trust that our managers and the executives are making their decisions with our best interests and the best interests of our products in mind. We all have to understand and accept that we're working towards a common goal. Maureen mentioned we have over 300 engineers here. That's more than 40 engineering teams. But New Relic is not 40 engineering teams working on 40 different pieces of software. We're one company, we create one suite of products, and we have to work together. That's just the way it is. Mob programming in and itself is an exercise in implicit trust. Each member of the group has to trust that their input is as valid as every other person's, and that their voice is going to be heard if they raise it. Even if that voice is a quiet voice because that person doesn't like to talk aloud. You have to be willing to give everyone a chance to speak. In exchange, the group has to trust that each individual is bringing their best. You don't show up and half-ass it. That just doesn't work. That doesn't work if you're an individual. It doesn't work any better if you're in a mob. The same exact trust relationship has to exist between the team executing the mob, their manager, executives, our product managers. When the team's in the mob and we come across a question about the user experience, functionality, or scope that in the product, and we're not sure about which way to go, we don't fire off an email and then go sit at our desks and read Reddit for 6 hours while our manager has a meeting before they get back to us. That doesn't happen. The manager, product designer, our product manager, whoever it is, they come to the mob, they sit with us, and we answer that question now. We're not going to be wasted time being blocked waiting for a decision to be made if that decision can be made right now and we know who's going to make it. Part of that works because we do have a full ownership of the product, which means our product manager is assigned to our product. They own our product. They can answer our questions. There's not a team of people that we have to participate with to try and get consensus on how to make a decision. We have a single point of contact. This all works, and it allows us to make rapid decisions and change direction really quickly and with little effort, because everyone knows what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's crystal clear why we're making the decisions that we are. I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of responsibility. We all know what it's like not to raise the red flag on a serious issue until it's too late. We've all been there. We've all known that what was about to ship was questionable, but we wanted to go home and we were tired and we let it go, and then things went to hell. That's happened. It happens all the time. To be given the responsibility that we've been given as an engineering team, we're trusted to alert our stakeholders the second there's something wrong. If somebody finds something and we don't like it, we speak up. That applies to every aspect of the product, from user experience to the designs that we use for our UI mockups to language implementation details. In return, we are expecting our managers to act on our concerns. And we expect them to act with the same immediacy that we bring when we raise them. Mob programming is built on this concept. Every voice is of equal importance. Every individual has the expectation that they're being listened to. This implicit trust between one another, between the team and the engineering organization, is what ultimately makes mob programming work here. So right now, everybody in this room is thinking, yeah, this sounds utterly implausible, and there's absolutely no way this works in practice, and I would love nothing more than to agree with you. And in fact, a year and a half ago, I would have agreed with you. So let's talk about a little bit of reality. My team formed 18 months ago. In the first 6 months, the 6 months during which I was new to literally everything we did, we shipped 12 months worth of our product roadmap. We actually ran off the end. Our product manager had to spend a weekend creating more roadmap because we were building software so fast he couldn't keep up. In the following 12 months, we have sustained and increased that velocity. Not only are we continuing to ship features in our product at that same rate, we've actually completely rebuilt from scratch and replaced 2 of the biggest core data ingest systems we have. And our customers didn't know we did any of that work. We just fit it in. We do everything we do in 1-week intervals. And that results in a demonstrable deliverable. And I mean demonstrable as in we're going to put it on Blue Jeans, we're going to record the video, and the executives are going to watch it. Every Friday, we have code to demo. You don't have code to demo, A, you don't hold a demo because nobody wants to watch you stay, we don't have code to demo. But more importantly, that's your goal for the week. There is something you're doing every single iteration, and it results in actual workable, demonstrable code. That allows us to pivot our work really agilely because at no point are we ever committed for more than next week. Next Friday, we're changing our decision on what we're going to do the next week after that. So at worst, we can pivot in 1-week intervals. We plan everything we do in 1-week intervals so that at worst, we're throwing away 1 week of work if we have to abandon. Working as a mob allows each of us to become really versant in our entire product code base, eliminating silos, maximizing personal growth. When was the last time you could look at a development process and say, I can use this to further my career? I can't think of any examples there because no process I've ever worked with, and I've been through most of them at this point, has ever put the focus on improving the individual over shipping. We kind of get both because the process focuses on improving the individual so that we can ship. We're doing this every day, every single day. My own personal career has benefited immensely from the 1.5 years I've been doing this. And I can tie almost everything that's happened to me beneficially as I've progressed since I've joined this team to the fact that we use mob programming to do the work that we do. I wouldn't be able to achieve any of the things that I've been able to mark down in the last 18 months as by myself. I just wouldn't be able to do it. Not possible. The constant attention of multiple brains and multiple eyes has brought our defect rate way down. The incidence with which we are finding bugs in production and then having to go back and fix them has fallen to the point where we go weeks at a time with no bug reports. And for a product as large and complex as Insights with the number of people we have using it, that's pretty remarkable. I certainly never would have in a million years thought that was even achievable, let alone something that I can pretty much plan on. We rotate a pager between our teams. No, it's my cell phone, but pager duty. 1 out of every 5 weeks, I have to be on call. 1 out of every 5 weeks, I don't get paged because we don't ship software to production that makes a pager go off anymore. I don't like being paged. The open communication that we've managed to foster between the team, between our managers, and between the organization has started to ripple outward. It allows our team to keep all of our stakeholders, even the extended ones, really aware of everything that we're doing, why we're doing it, what hurdles we have, and then it gives our managers all the power they need to make sure there's nothing preventing us from moving forward. At the end of every week, we have a retrospective. We talk about everything that we did, and then we actually talk about the process of mobbing. We decide, what are we going to do to make this better? Then we put it into practice. And the whole time we're doing that, we're still rolling features, non-stop. That's mob programming at New Relic. Thank you.
Thank you, Cory. We'll take like a 5-minute break if you want to stand up, stretch your legs, refill your beverages, grab a LaCroix, take a moment. Caito will be back on 20 minutes or so for her talk, and then we'll have the panel after. We're just about ready to get started again if you want to rejoin us. All right, we'll get started. Caito is here to talk about mob strategies.
Can everyone hear me? All right, I got that mic right in my face. Perfect. All right, my name is Caito Scherr. I'm a software engineer, as Maureen said, here at New Relic. And I'm going to talk to you about the how of mobbing. So getting started and tools and techniques that we found to be most helpful. So first, mob programming is a powerful tool. It can easily fail without a strong base of prerequisites. There are various resources, some of which are broad, like getting managerial and company buy-in, and others are more specific and can be created or maintained easily by individuals or teams. It's helpful to agree on what tools you're going to try ahead of time. The implementation can and should be iterated upon to fit the team and project needs, and it's important to know what your goals are with these tools. Equally important, an easy point of mob failure is attempting to mob when you don't have buy-in from your teammates. Beyond simply wanting to be in the mob, this also extends to buy-in on whether the current task is truly worth mobbing on, or as I'm probably going to say later, is it mobbable? Let's see if I can actually pronounce that right each time. And the last thing I'll talk about is logistics of actually starting and how to keep that practice going. So for our resources, as I mentioned, buy-in from anyone else who is involved in your workflow is really important. This includes engineering managers, product and/or project managers, and possibly other teams if you work really closely with them. We also have a multi-team group here to support each other and other teams that are trying to mob. This exists as a bi-weekly meeting as well as an internal Slack channel. An important part of mob programming success is having built-in opportunities to iterate and improve upon the process in a healthy and productive way. Because honestly, if you have dirty laundry, stuffing it in a corner actually doesn't make it clean. It might actually get worse, it might hurt things around it, it's kind of gross. Retros, as Cory mentioned earlier, this is a really great place to air out that dirty laundry so you can just move on. So there are many teams here that do retros, and they all do it pretty differently. Some teams, like mine, even change their retro format every single week just to spice it up. In general, though, I found it's pretty helpful to have a couple things consistent, such as doing your retros on a weekly or at least per sprint basis. For my team, our sprints are on a week, so that works pretty well. Going over what worked that week, going over what didn't work, having goals and action items to take out of that meeting, and most importantly, keeping it blameless, because blame violates that team trust that Cory was talking about. So blameless feedback is made possible because of regular, transparent discussions between team members about those things that didn't work or the ones that did work. Because we normalize this feedback, it's less of a big deal, and we can continue to use it to shape and improve upon our teams. It's also an opportunity for teammates to give context for issues or find out how they can better help their teammates if they're struggling. All of this strengthens that team trust and enables the team to work better as a unit. A team charter or working agreement is a tangible expression of the team's philosophy and workflow. Agreeing on potential points of conflict or just general etiquette ahead of time can really help streamline discussions. That team charter is a starting point. It's a foundation for how you want your team to function. It's for setting expectations. my team's mob charter includes etiquette, and we trust that our teammates can communicate tactfully. So these guidelines are really more focused on making sure that there's a space for innovation and discussion while still preventing getting derailed on lower priority parts of tasks. This section is not intended to define communication styles, but it does often provide a natural and low-stress way for teammates, particularly those who are new to the team, new to software, new to mobbing, or who are more introverted, to ensure that the team is inclusive of that person's needs and all the needs. Our charter also includes protocol for when to mob, and just as importantly, when not to mob. We have definitions for rotational roles within the mob, and agreed upon purposes for things like breaks. This should be a living document. It's something that every team member should feel completely comfortable editing. It's really a set of guidelines. It's aspirational. It doesn't define what we're perfect at, but it outlines our goals and what we as a group want to strive to practice on a daily basis. Our charter exemplifies our team philosophy on various tools and their use. Mobbing is one of those tools. An example of a philosophy that we use for that tool is that the mob is a safe place for no. This means that anyone on the team can opt out for any reason. This helps to ensure that everyone who's there is completely, fully invested in the mob. Otherwise, you could have a group of people who are distracted, fidgety, or resentful, and that can seriously slow down your velocity. So one reason for this is that fidgeting and restlessness are actually your body's way of telling you that you need to stop or hammer time. Either one, they both work pretty well. These behaviors are your body's way of saying that you need movement and brain rest, because without it, you're actually going to be a lot less productive. A rested brain has a lot more energy for focusing. And while at rest, the brain actually absorbs knowledge much better, meaning that breaks are that much more important while you're learning. Even MIT has recommendations to how to take productive breaks on their official study site for all new students. It's important to acknowledge this need, address it head on, and use it as a guideline to increase productivity. We've outlined this philosophy and how we'd like to implement it in our charter. This means that if we notice we're distracted, we can use that to iterate on our break schedule. For instance, now a couple of our teams start with a break because we found that people were much more focused after they got a chance to get all of it out and get settled right at the start. Now, a strong team is a diverse team, where each team member brings something different and complementary to the table. A strong team like this is unlikely to have people who all think the same. So how do you ensure that all these different voices are heard and these ideas are implemented productively? Mob programming is also a lot of social contact for some people, even us extroverts. It's a lot. So how do you ensure that you're reaping the benefits of mobbing without being socially or emotionally draining to your team? Mob programming is a practice, and we're all constantly learning and improving on how we work together. Retros and charters are places to state and reiterate practices that are inclusive to a variety of personalities and work styles. But equally important is ensuring that each individual knows that they can leave the mob because we're not forcing anyone to be there if they feel uncomfortable. And honestly, part of being a good engineer is knowing how and when to apply your tools. And mobbing doesn't have to be your only tool. Be in a mob if there's a problem that needs resolving as a group. You should all know why you're there, and it should be because mobbing is really the best thing to do for that task. For instance, my team is currently on a project that's just not mobbable. Not all projects and not all work are amenable to mobbing. And bottom line here is that the mob is only as powerful as it is intentional. There's a couple ways we can determine both is it mobbable as well as is it intentional. This also works really well for task management. So on our breaks, while we're rotating through the mob, we often ask, is this task still the most important task for us to be doing right now? If it is, then does the task fulfill the team's idea of what's useful to work on together as a group? And does everyone feel good about being here? Oh, there's more. So if that's the case, then the mob should keep going. That makes sense. However, if it's not mobbable, then figure out who can split off and work either solo or as a pair on that task. We have a lot of tasks that just, as I said, are not mobbable. So this is a really great way to just solve that really quickly before we all end up watching someone write documentation. So at this point, the rest of the group can also decide on a new task to focus on as a group, or we can continue to keep splitting off into pairs and solos. If the task is not our highest priority task, is there another higher priority task that we can be focused on? If there is, then we can go back and evaluate. Again, is that appropriate for the group? Is it mobbable? At some point I'm going to mispronounce that. Or is it solo or appropriate for pairs? If there really isn't any other high priority task, then the team can sit there and make sure that there's something for everyone to work on that's still appropriate and still productive. And of course, the mob can still continue if there is another mobbable task. So as for our tools, there are many that can really help make your mob successful. The most basic of which, and really foundational, especially that in my opinion, is a timer to make sure that every person gets a turn. I'm particularly fond of the Pomodoro technique because the goal with the system is to really focus on those productive productivity cycles, healthy productivity cycles, also productive. And there are a couple of philosophies behind this. The most important of which are that those breaks are used for that brain rest and movement that you need. And it's done through a series of work break pairs, starting with short breaks, with long breaks after a specified number of work sessions. It also supports the idea that distraction should be given outlets and addressed head-on so that it does not overpower your workday. Part of this is knowing that integrating any new habit into your routine can be very challenging. It can take days or weeks to successfully adapt to a timer-based productivity system. So it's important to be patient, to know that this is a tool that you can mold to fit the needs of your team and for your project. So traditionally, it starts with a 20-minute work session, followed by a 5-minute break. I hope everyone in the back can see that's a LaCroix can. That's just what our breaks are for. Then it repeats 4 times. So that's essentially the Pomodoro. And as for the breaks, as I said, long breaks typically for brain rest, get some movement in there, loosen up a little bit. Personal tasks, this is time to either socialize with your teammates or take care of personal phone calls or posting pictures of your cat to the internet, all very important things that you just need to make sure you get that outlet during the day. My team also encourages bio breaks, which promotes a healthy hydration schedule. I'm hoping you can just infer what that means yourself. This, as you saw by the last slide, also often just means many cans of LaCroix and possibly all of us being on the same bathroom schedule. Or not, leave that to your imagination. So short breaks, typically for evaluating the priority of the current task and for task management. So this often involves asking those questions that we saw in the flow chart. And a side note, these breaks are a really great way to accommodate those different personality types and work styles because it gives each person the opportunity to take care of those personal needs on a predictable schedule. And really just to have a breather away from the mob as well, which makes people a lot more excited to come back into the mob. So as we're getting started, biggest thing is just setting up those prereqs. Communicate with your team about what these are, what you want out of them, and make sure you write them down. So code reviews. Code reviews are a really awesome place to get started with mobbing. It's beneficial to have multiple engineer eyes on code that's going to be merged or deployed. It's really good practice for how good are we at respectfully disagreeing and still efficiently putting out code that we all believe in. That's hard. So really easy way to ease into that. It's a chance for validating code that's going to production, making sure it's performant, meets standards, and solves what was requested of us. It's also an awesome sneak attack for mob programming. It's easy to try out, it's very comfortable for most engineers, and it can show others how productive mob programming can be, because instead of a week in Chatter or maybe a day over Slack or whatever internal tools you might have for chat, it can be 30 minutes in person discussion done. This is true for software, legal briefs. I was going to say the plural for thesis, but I can't pronounce that, so we're going to go with scientific papers, and anything else that benefits from group buy-in. Now, one of the biggest benefits of mob programming, as we've heard today, when done well, is a heightened team focus. However, if you don't set boundaries with other teams, with management, with your own team, you could continue to be interrupted and lose that focus. So a couple ways in which we set boundaries here. As Cory mentioned, we have an on-call rotation, and how that is implicated in the mob is that that person, whoever is on call, either does not mob with us at all, or we just make sure that we do not use that person's computer, so that that person can be interrupted for the rest of us. Another thing that some teams here do is have office hours. This is a really awesome way to show other teams that you are accountable, you're willing and able to help them, while still time boxing any work that you're not doing explicitly for your team. Time boxing loose ends is a helpful way of setting boundaries as well within the team, acknowledging that other teams may need a small chunk of time, either in the morning or the end of the day, to check email and generally take care of non-mob related tasks. We also practice calendar awareness. Our team tries to go over our collective calendars a week in advance of our weekly sprint meetings, so we know that if anyone is planning on being out or has excessive meetings, which also means in that case we can sympathize with them because meetings are terrible. So this also gives us a better idea of how many engineer hours we realistically actually have at our disposal for that upcoming sprint. So retros can be a great way to ensure that this process is iterated upon to fit the needs of the business and for your team. But iteration also happens naturally through discussions and questions that come up both during the mob and during your breaks. So overall, the main benefits that I find using specifically the timer system for the mob is that by allowing myself to have that brain rest and not constantly be shifting gears between my engineering work or interruptions or emails, I have way more energy. The system improves communication by creating regular, predictable opportunities for checking in on tasks and projects, and brief, regular social interactions between people involved in the same project has shown to enable stronger communication. It increases comfort level and humanizes those around you. Having sanctioned time to do these interpersonal activities can alleviate guilt or anxiety that team members might feel about taking time during the workday for an inevitable non-work related task or conversation, and knowing that it's also not going to cut into their valuable work time. Lastly, the system really helps keep everyone involved accountable. It helps individuals stay accountable to themselves by having built-in time to ensure that their engineer work is taken care of and to take breaks. It helps individuals stay accountable to their team by checking in regularly about task prioritization and raising those red flags early. It helps the team stay accountable to management by having tasks time-boxed for efficiency, as well as having other built-in opportunities to check in with management or others you're working with if necessary. Mobbing is most successful when the team has found and agreed upon prerequisites, while also knowing that those can and really should be iterated upon to fit the team needs. Setting boundaries for your team, for non-programming tasks, for other teams, and for management. Ensuring opt-in of all team members and stakeholders. Finding and customized tools that are going to work for you. And then once you have that foundation, iterating on your timer lengths, charters, and retro formats, and being patient with integrating this into your routine. Because it's not about being perfect, but having a solid philosophy and some really good tools. So I'd like to thank the Futuretalks team for helping us set this up. Y'all are amazing. the Pass, Acts, and Insights teams, as well as our help mobbing. That's our group that we have internally to help support each other. And I encourage any of you to bring this back to your companies as well. It's been super helpful. Huge thanks to Maureen and Cory and to all my photo models, which hopefully you can still see all that. Yeah, thanks.
So with that, we'd love to take your questions. Matt and Ro are going to be coming around. They have mics so that we can make sure everyone can hear you. And we're going to check and make sure that we're in the light. Looks pretty good. I think we have to scoot this way. I see hands.
Hey, thanks for the talk. You mentioned remote mob programming. Can you talk a little bit about what tools you're using for that and any challenges you've encountered?
Can I take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. On any given day, we have one person remote. Once or twice a week, we'll have the whole team in the office, but we frequently have at least one person who needs to come in remotely. We've tried a fair number of tools. We've settled on Screen Hero. Predominantly, that is because it's the best for the actual sharing session, and it allows the remote person to take over the desktop of the person hosting the session and actually, as if they had just taken the keyboard. We've tried Blue Jeans. It's terrible. The lag is just unusably bad. We've tried, there are some plugins for the various editors. Adam has one that I am familiar with specifically that allows the editor contents to be shared, and then all you need is a voice or video link. I wasn't able to get it functional for us, but one of the other teams here, who's actually, they manage our hardware in our data center, they have been able to get it to work really well for that. So that's another option if what you predominantly need to share is just the contents of the editor. I've heard good stories from people who have used the other, screen sharing apps that are out there for other platforms. We're a Mac shop, so that's mostly what we use here has been Screen Hero. We're waiting for Slack's integration since they bought Screen Hero to make Slack calls catch up so that they work a lot better. So far, if you initiate a call from within Slack, it doesn't screen share very well.
We just started using that, and it actually was working a little bit better for us recently.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was pretty
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Cool. Go for it.
Yeah, just could you comment on how you select the teams and some of the considerations like, experience levels in engineering, and do you try to select for different types of personalities, and what other criteria do you think about?
I can give a little bit of backdrop that'll help set the stage for it. A little over a year and a half ago, the engineering department here completely reorganized. And that was when we inverted and went from individual contributors that made up teams to teams. Everything became team-centric. All of our projects and products became team-oriented. And we then went and did a big offsite, and everybody got to choose what they wanted to work on. So that's actually how I ended up changing teams. I was on the mobile team. I was a mobile developer, and I thought, hey, you know what? I want to learn JavaScript, so I'm going to go do that. Since then, the outcome was that we've restructured how people can move between teams to just open it up, that if there is an opening on a team, it's published internally. If you're interested in that, you talk to the hiring manager, and if you're a good fit for what they need, you can move. Typically, when we're going to hire someone for a team, especially for recruiting from outside the company, we put most of the focus on what skills can they bring to the table that we don't currently have. And typically, that does not focus on technical skills. That's predominantly what we would consider the non-technical skills. In our case, we were hiring someone. We knew we could train them very rapidly to learn the technical aspects of it. So we focused on someone who could bring in a whole lot of skills from her previous career that had nothing to do with software that not a one of us had any really good experience with. She's very good at balancing communications, making sure everybody gets to speak their even turn, things like that. So that actually, for at least my team, I don't want to talk for everybody, but at least my team, that's really what we focus on.
I work on a very polyglot team. So the more different technical experiences we bring to the table, the higher our velocity stays. So we really benefit from having like these really very different technical perspectives on the team. Then we also have a breadth of senior down to 1 to 2 years software experience. I think Ro had a question in the back.
Hey, thanks for your talk. Two questions. Shorter one first. So I think this negates the whole process of code reviews, right? First thing is that. Second thing, what goes into the prep work for any mobbing session in terms of, so besides the ones that showed on the presentation, for instance, if you're splitting down stories or issues or tickets or however, what's the granularity that you break that down? And the design process, is that something separate or does that go into the mobbing session?
That's the first one or the second one?
Second one.
Okay, take the first. So for code reviews, yeah, you're right. It does. It changes what the review is. We front load so much of the review into writing the code that the code review will come down to checking for punctuation, indentation. It's a little bit more formulaic. We tend to do code reviews that will go back and exercise every path of code that we've written and validate that our unit tests have run against it, and just kind of really do a sanity check on what we're putting out. But it does really change that specific process.
So I was thinking about that second question. I feel like it really depends on the team. So for some teams, like I know you work closely with designer, our team less so. So I think I may have to call a friend on that, answering that one for just like, since our team's so rarely.
Yeah.
We actually have a dedicated designer who works directly with us. She's actually part of everything we do. She comes to our sprints, she comes to our planning meetings on a day-to-day basis. Anytime we have any question about the usability aspect of anything that we're building that we don't already have, she does mock-ups, really, really sophisticated mock-ups for us. And if what we have isn't in the mock-up or the question we have isn't in the mock-up, we actually call her. She'll come and sit with the mob and she'll walk us through exactly what she's looking for. And frequently that it turns into a conversation about, okay, well, that sounds neat, but I think if we implement this a little bit differently, you'll get this extra behavior and it'll do this thing. And all of a sudden she's completely sold that the alteration that we wanted to do actually is better than what she would have envisioned because she couldn't see it working. She was working with mock-ups. So from the UX design, we have a team of designers and we have one who's actually assigned to our team. And all of our customer-facing products work that way.
And as for some of the other positions, so as I said, our team doesn't really work with a designer. However, we do have architects, we have PMs, we have other people that often we have to work very closely with. As Cory mentioned, sometimes we'll just rope those people into the mob. Typically, my team works, if we do mob, we are just in a mob with just the team. But it's very easy to say, I remember one time our architect just happened to be walking by and it was just lovely, just like, whoop. And we had all of our questions answered. And that's actually pretty common. I think that happened like 3 times today. So it's something that you can schedule. It's something that can be very fluid. Typically, we do not involve them as a default. However, it's very easy to bring them in for very specific things and really kind of make that efficient with that process.
I think we also, to address just like estimating your work, we'll tend to stick with the estimate we give the first time, even if it turns out that doing the work, it gets a bit more complicated and takes more time. We really try to get to the work as quickly as possible and don't spend more than our hour of sprint planning to plan that work. We really try to get to the mob as quickly as possible. It's another kind of philosophy we'll use.
And then just kind of as the you had initially asked a little bit like how do you get prepared for a mob? Since we do it every day, we have a sequence of things that happen every single day to get us ready for it. We do our stand up. We walk together. We get a cup of coffee here in the kitchen. Then we head to the mediascape. The first thing we do when we get to the mediascape is grab the whiteboard and write out a checklist of the things we're going to get done before lunch. And that is not a list of things we might want to work on. That is the list of things we intend to build before lunch, if at all possible. And if we can't finish that list, that's actually going to produce something we need to talk to our managers about. And the list ultimately becomes the driver for what keeps the mob on focus, because at any point if we drift, that's also the thing that we go back to. And it gives you this incredibly mental high of checking off boxes.
Yep.
I never would have anticipated how important that is, but literally everybody on the team is obsessed with getting the red marker and checking off the boxes. It came out of nowhere. It was a total surprise, and I could not be happier with it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Andrew up here?
As a mentor and a tech educator, the second you mentioned bringing in a junior with no professional dev experience, my heart just swelled with excitement that maybe they would hope. So I was hoping you would maybe speak a little bit more to sort of what happened after that. Is there now a pipeline involving mob programming? Could you envision a pipeline involving mob programming as an onboarding method for new talent that isn't as intensive of, oh, just make more documentation. Oh, just assume they're going to be not productive for a year, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's not officially part of our onboarding process yet, but all of the teams that are mobbing have definitely begun to integrate that as they're all part of their onboarding process. Whether the person joining the team is an experienced engineer or not, I mean, you're joining a new team, you're joining a new piece of software. The software that we build is big and complicated. It doesn't matter who you are. You're going to have to spend front load the first couple of months doing nothing but learning a tremendous amount. That is amplified for someone who is entering the industry. Caito joined the mob on my team when she was still an intern here. I think we sold her because she joined the company immediately afterwards. And it was so successful, first for me and then for her. And then we actually decided as a team, we have a new opening on the team. We're expanding. We have, somebody had moved to another team. We had an opening. We decided that we weren't even going to interview experienced engineers. We were only interested in interviewing people who had just finished code school and had little to no experience, because we knew that the technical curve was not going to be the hurdle. And it allowed us to prioritize shopping for other things. I will readily admit I'm extremely bad at planning and keeping track of things. Like, that's not my skill set. She is so good at it. I never would have envisioned what it was like to have someone add to the team and on day one immediately make everything better. And in exchange, like, she got to go from 0 to fully productive member of our team in 6 months, like far faster than I would have anticipated anyone being able to cross that gap. I mean, considering we're building in 3 different languages with 2 different data stores and across, I think, 10 different software systems now, she even understands our build system, and that's NPM based. So I would absolutely love to see this process adopted, even if only for the onboarding process alone, that much of it, because it's the difference between here's some busy work that you can use to teach yourself, and let's sit down and have you build a piece of functional production code, ship it to production, and let you demo it in your first day on the office. Let's just do that. And I don't know that anybody could equal that in terms of the raw emotional power it has to a new hire.
Yeah, the agency that someone can have very quickly to be a full contributing team member, regardless of their experience level, is really, really there. Our engineering trainer for all new engineers who start here has also started using a mob to take people with very different backgrounds who may all be starting the same day in design and engineering and in HR. Like, they sit and they mob on a task to use our software for the first time. So from day one here, you can kind of have that experience of collaborative work and really see how far it can go. The back?
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Apologies if this has already been asked, but I think it might be for Caito. Now I've forgotten it.
Just answer random questions.
Oh, yeah. So it was when do you decide whether something is mobbable, right? You gave the example of maybe you don't want to mob documentation writing, but are there other examples of things that don't lend themselves to mobbing specifically?
Totally. That's a really good question. And for us as a team, it's really been a learning experience on what those things are, because sometimes documentation is totally mobbable. It just really depends. We try to go in to a lot of those tasks with what do we want to get out of this? So like as Cory said, they do a list. Ours is a little bit more verbal. So we really go in thinking, okay, our goal is to get this accomplished. So for instance, if we do want to mob on documentation, maybe we want to make sure we can lay everything out, but then we really don't care about formatting, punctuation, things like that. But this other person can go do that solo afterwards. Same thing for writing tests. Maybe we want to mob on the test plan or the test like design for what we want to test on. But we don't want to just go through and write every single unit test as a group, because especially if it's just following another format, maybe there's a lot of, I think one really good baseline is how much copy paste is there. And sometimes that can be really helpful. Like today, our mob was learning from Maureen a completely new language that we'd never written in, a completely new system. That being said, there's still very little copy paste, but even then it was still useful because it was a very new environment for all of us to be working in. So I feel like that it's a very case-by-case thing, but it has to be something that we're willing to discuss at the onset, and we're willing to catch each other quickly. Most of the ways that we figure out if it's not mobbable is we've already started it. We already did a work session on it, and a work session can be anywhere from 5 to 25 minutes. Even on the long end, you're still getting a pretty short amount of time to figure out, okay, this is not working. If people are distracted and fidgety, that can also be a sign of maybe not everyone is learning from this. Maybe we do need to split this up. So really, I think it boils down to looking at the moment, looking at how engaged people are in it. Are people learning? Is this something, we actually have on our charter, we have a whole list of, is this something that the whole team needs to know about? Is it something that, one of us is going to have to present on it? There's a whole series of criteria that we've evolved, and we keep adding to this list for things that make it mobbable or not mobbable.
One of the indicators for us is, and Caito did allude to this, does this task represent knowledge that needs to be transferred across the team? Even if it seems really uninteresting, if it's siloed knowledge and anybody else on the team can benefit from learning that, that is an extremely good task to have the mob do. And unexpectedly, I thought those would be terrible tasks, because if all I'm doing is some knowledge transfer, that's boring stuff. Well, it's boring to me because I know it. It's not boring to the 4 other people at that table who have never seen that code before. They are obsessed with learning it. And pretty soon, it's incredibly entertaining to teach it to them. So anytime there's an opportunity to spread information, things that make a bad mob task, anything with large amounts of time delay. We spent a bunch of time over the summer reworking our build system. Builds.
Yeah, seconded.
If your build takes 15 minutes before you see the result, that is a bad mob task, because that's 15 minutes of everybody reading Twitter, 5 seconds of action, then everybody back on Twitter. So that was something we had, and we actually learned that by experience. We did start out mobbing on that stuff, and we pretty quickly realized that if you can't keep everybody engaged, that is a bad match.
Yeah. Fun.
Over here, yeah.
Speaking of keeping everyone engaged, I'm a project manager, and I was sent to ask this. Well, my own idea to come, but my devs were like, find this out. They have trouble imagining what the group is doing during the mob. How do you participate if you're not driving? How are you participating if you're not the navigator? Can you get really kind of explicit about what that looks like?
You need to act it out.
The FOMO, specifically this noticeable FOMO that we see now, it's easy to miss something. So if you're not actively driving or like assign that navigator role, it could be your turn next, and you could have no idea where you just were. You could miss the context of why a particular decision was made. And so it's a bit of accountability to kind of keep the focus and say, okay, I know where we were and I know where we're going and I'm fully engaged here. How do you guys feel about that one?
Yeah, it's also, I think, another one of these things. A lot of these tools are things that you practice. Like, it's not a binary. There is not achieve and achieve. It's not like your goal is just kind of done when you've achieved it. It's all about practice. And so this is a thing that we practice constantly. I think especially if you're the driver or navigator, sometimes like, how do I make this more interesting? Like, how do I keep people engaged? And then if you're not, how do you stay engaged? Sometimes I secretly just kind of speed up the timer and I'm like, oh, it's your turn now. And then people like you just like you want but like if your turn is up next, there's a little bit more investment in it, and I have noticed, especially for tasks that are a little less exciting inherently, we purposely will adjust our timer based on the task. So it's something that we're all really excited about. 25-minute timer is awesome because everyone is just on the edge of their seats, wanting to know what the answer to that problem is, and if it's not, then maybe make it shorter so that your turn is coming up really fast.
Yeah.
So the way that we do it is that there's the driver, the person next to them. We don't use the formal rules quite the way the other teams do. The driver is the person in the front of the keyboard. Somebody is running the timer. I have a Pomodoro timer app for my phone that shows up. So I just start that and set it on the table. Everybody else is there to collaborate. However best fits the individual, and it took us a while to work out how that was going to behave. One of the things that I found, and learning mode helps reinforce this because you're already opting to put the person who needs to learn the most into the driver's seat, which means you're also making the decision to take yourself out of the driver's seat so you can be a subject matter expert for the purpose of helping them learn. I actually, these days, spend a very small fraction of my time driving. I get a lot more pleasure and enjoyment and satisfaction out of being kind of the collaborative leader. I have a lot more knowledge than everybody else on the team. I've been doing this longer. I tend to find that a lot of the information that I have, while I may not be anywhere near the smartest JavaScript developer on the team, I have a lot of architectural knowledge that can benefit every decision that we make. And I can contribute a lot more to the team by not being in front of the keyboard or sitting next to it and dictating. Instead, I watch what's happening and I ask a lot of questions. Every time I see any assumption being made, I verbalize that assumption and ask why that assumption was made. It can help, especially as you're getting into the process for the first time, to be more prescriptive about the roles and say okay, so we're going to move around the circle. The roles are going to be dictated. You're the driver, you're the navigator, you're the timer. You two are subject matter experts. Deciding beyond that, kind of how you want to shape it, very much evolves out of the personalities that you have.
Huge +1 to asking questions too. I think that's one of the key things in keeping people engaged, is encouraging you should constantly be asking those questions to the group.
We have one team member who every couple of minutes picks the person who looks the least engaged and asks them what they think of what we're doing and what they would do differently. And the first time it happens, you're like, oh, I wasn't paying attention and I don't know what's going on and I have to admit to the group that I haven't been paying attention. Then after that, you find that you're a lot more interested in paying attention because that question is going to come up. And not only do you not want to be the guy who wasn't paying any attention to what everybody else was doing, you have opinions on these things and you were waiting for someone to ask.
I would also feel free to push that question back to the engineers asking it. They need to opt in. They need to make themselves accountable for spending engineering resources in that time. And that is absolutely a question that they should be asking themselves. What am I getting out of this? If I'm observing and not actively participating, that's where that contract of buy-in happens. Seeing the value and getting value out of just observing. I think we'll do one more question from Ro in the back, and then we'll maybe do a little bit of wrap up, and we'll stay longer, but we'll just turn the mics off and stuff.
So a lot of the conversation has been around kind of the code generating type of. What about some of the other teams that you have here? I know you've got tech support, you've got New Relic University, customer service. Have any of those teams kind of adopted this approach? And if they have, how well has it worked?
Our support team is adopting it like gangbusters. I think there's more teams in support using it than there are in engineering. And they have found an incredible benefit from it because it allows them to take support engineers who normally support one product, take 4 or 5 of them, get them around a table, pull together all of the tickets from all of their products, solve them as a group. They burn through the list faster, and at the end, everybody knows the answer to every question that came up. So I know for a fact they've been doing it. Outside of them, I'm not sure how many other groups are starting to engage with it. Our design team doesn't because the designers are each assigned to specific teams, but they do the core work that they do for like defining design language and personas and all that stuff, they do that as a group. It's not the same as the way we would approach a mob, but it's very similar collaborative work.
I'm so glad that you had examples because I didn't know that.
My answer is going to be I live in a bubble.
I'm very curious.
Yeah, the junior engineer that my team hired, I'm sorry for my use of the term junior engineer, she actually came from support. She worked in support for about 9 months before she applied for the position that we hired her for. And so she has a bunch of folks that she still knows and works with regularly. So she brought the concept to them after we introduced it to her, and it really took off down there. I actually think it's widely applicable. It's just a matter of figuring out how to adapt it to the type of group that you have and the problem you're trying to solve.
So with that in mind, I'd asked you both earlier for one takeaway from or one thing you'd like everyone to leave here with tonight.
I forgot mine, so Cory should go.
Okay. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is trust. No organization, no team, no group, no process can possibly succeed if you don't have the right level of trust. And at the end of the day, if you really want to have something that can function at the level that we've gotten the benefits out of that we have, you got to learn to trust everybody.
And mine would be, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm going to use like an umbrella thing. So mine would be using distraction as a guideline. And I'm going to include under that, conveniently, that distraction can include buy-in from stakeholders, buy-in from your team, anything that needs to be addressed as a group and how your teammates feel.
And mine is to focus on the ability of a group with different backgrounds and different experience levels to learn from each other and to leverage those different experiences to just do really great work and have fun doing it. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. We'll stick around if you have a few more questions. Do we have any other announcements? Future Talk will be back in November. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.